So, my name's Ivo Allen. I am the founder and CEO of 911 Inform. I want to thank everyone for showing up here today and everyone online that's here. I want to thank CBC, Jeff over there eating a sandwich. Give him a big round of applause for letting us host this today. We have Avaya, we have the VARs here, so I want to thank everyone for coming in. Just want to give you kind of a background of how we got started with 911 Inform. About 5 years ago, I'm watching the Dateline episode on the school shootings with my wife, and in that episode it said that 80% of the fatalities in a school shooting were from non-life-threatening gunshot wounds. So the police couldn't enter the building, students, faculty were shot, and they just basically bled out. So we're watching the episode, and my wife says, well, you do all the police in New Jersey, and you do all the schools in New Jersey. Why is that? So I went out and started talking to the police departments, looking at the schools to find out what tools, what they had. And it turned out that there wasn't anything in the market that gave the police real-time situational awareness in an emergency. So I went back to my wife and I said, it doesn't exist. And she said, well, you need to fix it. So to save my marriage, I basically started developing 911 Inform. And we started about 5 years ago. We've been in development for 3 years before we even launched, before we went live. So this product has been put through its paces. What you're going to see tonight is the 3 different modules, how we make a building safer. But everyone's focused on the active shooter in the worst case scenario. What I want to do is I want to actually, if you want to switch, Max, okay. I want to share a story with you guys of how we saved someone's life with our software. What you're seeing on the screen is a live capture of 911 Inform from East Brunswick School District. And what this is and what happened was a student was having a seizure in a classroom in the East Brunswick Middle School. And what happened was when the teacher called 911 from her office phone, the phone in the classroom, the carrier substituted the billing telephone number on the account for the 911 number and actually sent the police to the administration building. Okay? So they had 911 Inform. We actually showed the police that it wasn't in the administration building. It was in the high school. And not only did we show what classroom it is, but we actually routed the police to door 13, which was 20 feet from where the emergency was. So in this case, talking to the chief of police in East Brunswick and talking to Paul, the security director, we took 15 minutes off the response time. If that school did not have 911 Inform, the police would have gone to the wrong building and it would take them 15 minutes to actually get to where that emergency is. So when you look at 911 Inform, it's not just for the worst case scenarios, it's about saving lives every day. So in every school, there's 5,000 911 calls from schools a day in the United States. Our product will get, on average, response to that student, that faculty member, 5 minutes faster on average. So with that, what I'm going to do is introduce our Chief Operating Officer, Jody Grand Prix.
Thank you, Ivo. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you're going to see today, talk about some of the markets that we're really active in right now, and then we'll turn it over to Cody, who will do a live demo. But our product is really based off of 3 modules. And the first module is our compliancy module. And with that, we solve for Ray Bombs, Kerry's Law, Alyssa's Law. And those are Ray Bombs became fully effective on January 6th of this year. It's a federal law. It's got a lot of teeth to it. And we're seeing a lot of customers scramble. This in many cases becomes the Trojan horse for our product. It's it's what people go into because of the law, and then we see them coming back adding on the additional modules as we go. Key I want you to know about the way we do Ray Bombs and the tracking of it, and you'll see it in the demo, is in most of our competitors you have to have a DID number and an address if you want to get down to individual office and cubicle locations. With our solution, we recommend 1 number per building. So from an administration standpoint, much, much easier to administer than what people are used to looking at. So you'll see that in the demo, but that's one of the silver bullets of our ray bombs, is how we handle the DID numbers. The second, which is an exclusive to 911 Inform, is the cellular notification. This is one of my favorite features of the system. But what we do is we micro geofence the customer's property. Anybody who walks into that building and dials 911 from their cell phone, no application, they're not in a database anywhere. They're not calling. You don't need to know who they are. Activates our system, and we show the customer where that cell phone 911 call came from, inside the building or outside the building. And a little statistic, only 20% of 911 calls are coming from a customer-provided telephone. Over 80% of 911 calls are coming from cell phones. So we're usually competing with people that are solving for ray bombs. They're solving for 20% of the calls. We can solve for 100% of the calls. So it's a real game changer for us with our cellular notification. Our last module is our connected building module. And again, this is a pretty unique feature in the marketplace, but we connect to the customer's existing technology. So in the facility here, we connected to the video cameras, the access control, the strobe lights, the paging system. And in an emergency, we hand that technology to public safety. So a police could sit in his police car on his tough book and view video cameras or page across the classroom or video, really tie into all those technology. But the key to that is we give public safety the access to the customer's technology during an emergency, and we take it away when that emergency is over. So it really covers for a lot of the privacy laws. I'm going to talk a little bit about our top markets. As you see, I won't read them to you, but our top markets are probably the same markets that a lot of you are working with in the marketplace. But a couple I'll focus on specifically is higher ed. And so with higher ed, what we're really seeing is when we go into colleges and universities, is they've bought piece parts of a solution. So they have some, facial recognition, or they have some gunshot detection on the boundaries, but they don't really have an easy way to manage it. What we did at this university specifically is we integrated with their blue light phones, their spot shotter on their gunshot detection, and what we gave them is a single pane of glass. So they went from having to monitor or have 3 or 4 monitors up in an emergency to now they only need 1 monitor up with our solution, and they can manage all the different technology in their building. So we're seeing that single pane of glass really be a big play for us. If we look at hospitals, the big thing we're seeing with hospitals is, they're really from a subnet trying to determine where phones are. Hospitals are a real problem because they didn't deploy their subnets by logical locations. They deployed their subnets by application. So you may see all the nurses stationed in the same subnet, but they may be on 10 floors. A unique feature to our solution is, for everybody else, they would need to redo those subnets. We have a way of solving where those phones are without having to have the customer redo all the subnets and make all the changes. So I don't want to get too crazy on the technology, but much, much easier lift for the customer on our solution than it would be traditionally. If we look at sports venues, sports venues are a perfect, a perfect application. Our applications are perfect for sports venue. If you've been to any sporting event, I don't care if it's hockey or football, there's 1,000 security people in that stand, but they are completely blind when somebody makes a cell phone 911 call. And so what we do is, because of our cellular technology, we can notify all the security guards actually before that cell phone call is answered at the PSAP. So again, it's all about taking minutes off of the response and making sure that that 911 call is handled. And the last one is corporate campuses. This corporate campus, for instance, has 3 addresses for 40 buildings. And so what we heard from them was every time they have an accident, every time they have a 911 call, they get lost in the corporate. None of the streets were named. They get lost. What we're able to do is not only, like we showed you, the quickest access on the door, we can show you what road to take to get there, how to get to that building, and then when you get to the building, you click into it, it gives you all the detail of that building, and again, all the controls for that building. So, the way we do our mapping and the way that we lay it over top of the Google Earth is, again, really sped up the amount of time, for response to those incidents. So that's kind of what you're going to see today. I'm going to turn it over to Cody. one of our national account managers, and we're going to run through the demonstration.
Awesome. Thank you, Jody. So before we jump into a live demonstration here in just a minute, I want to take a second and talk about the different compliance aspects that Jody and Ivo had mentioned previously. So in the past couple of years, there's been two main pieces of legislation that have passed, specifically regarding any PBX or hosted solutions deployed in an organization. So who does this pertain to? It's really any of those different facilities and verticals that Jody was talking about, whether it's schools, sports complexes, corporate campuses, hospitals, and a variety of other environments. And what that legislation is both Carey's Law as well as Ray Baum's Act. So in February of 2020, Carey's Law went into effect, and what that requires is that you provide a means of on-site notification when 911 is dialed from any of those PBX devices, as well as direct access to 911, removing the need to hit that outside access line in order to reach emergency services. Fairly simple in nature to solve for with most environments today. What that did was laid the groundwork for Ray Baum's Act to pass, which was shortly passed thereafter. In January 6th of 2021, Phase 1 went into effect. And what Ray Baum's Act requires is it extended Carey's Law to now require what's called an accurate dispatchable location. So with those 911 calls, both the alert to the on-site teams as well as to public safety must include additional data beyond just the street address of the facility. So in many cases, this includes the floor, the suite, the wing, or even the room number. And that went into effect January 6th of 2021 for wired devices. Shortly after, January 6th of this year, that went into effect for wireless devices. So again, bringing in that dispatchable location requirement. Wireless devices meaning any 802.11 handsets, soft phone clients, devices that are still off of that PBX environment, but may not be physically plugged into the network itself. So now that we understand that legislation, how can we account for this? So with the 911 Inform platform, we can account for any environment, any device, and any platform more importantly. Whether we have a Cisco on-prem hosted or Cisco on-prem solution like we have here at CVCHS, via solutions, whether that's IP Office, CMs, or a variety of different hosted environments that we're now running into ACO, RingCentral, and a variety of other systems as well. We keep it a consistent user experience across the entire organization. So really important in those mixed environments that you don't have this set of rules for these users in this environment and a completely different set of rules for a different environment. I think, oh, we're still up there. Perfect. So how can we do this? Through a variety of different network forensics, we can automate a lot of those procedures, pulling in that data that Jody was talking about, both that layer 2 and layer 3 information. But as he was alluding to earlier, in a lot of cases that may not make sense for organizations. So we can introduce new metrics as well to get that precise and accurate device level location without the overhead of maintaining all of that and implementing it, reworking subnets, mapping out those switch ports from the beginning. And this is even more important in today's COVID environment where you may have a mix of users that are working from home. We have remote learning environments. And of course, we're always going to have those nomadic road warriors that are constantly on the move. Really important that we're accounting for each and every building as well as the entirety of those remote users. And again, keeping it consistent while minimizing the implementation and overhead of maintaining the solution on a day-to-day basis. So when we look at differentiators, why this is different than other 911 solutions on the market, one of those key differentiators is the mobile and work from home users do not incur an uplift in cost. There's not different licensing aspects to it. A user is a user at the end of the day. It shouldn't be determined if you're sending them home 6 months from now, you have to bounce between different licensing types. Along with that, as Jody had mentioned, we reduce the number of DIDs that are required for those devices or for that solution. So you don't need a device or a DID associated with every dispatchable location. That's the way 911 used to work in the past. Thankfully, the next generation 911 architecture allows us to significantly reduce that. Those locations are also updated in near real time, so we don't have that 24 to 72 hour lag period that we saw with E911 in the past. All of those updates are going to be up to date in real time. And most importantly, device locations are going to be precise and accurate. We know exactly where all those devices are located as soon as they're coming live on the network, and again, reducing that administrative overhead and maintenance of keeping that solution up to date. So what does this get us at the end of the day? In the past, E911 was all anyone ever talked about. It was enhanced 911, but it's very restrictive in nature. You look at the left-hand side of the screen up there. At the end of the day, you have access to 2 lines of information, and that's what the PSAPs, ECCs, or 911 centers are receiving. It contains the address of the facility and 20 to 30 characters of static data that must be pre-provisioned ahead of that call. So in this example on the screen there, you see Suite C being called out as that dispatchable location. May be relevant to someone internal to that facility, but a police officer who's coming into that building for the first time may have absolutely no idea what Suite C is. So while we do send data through that mechanism, we're also sending it through the NG911 or Next Generation 911 ecosystem, establishing an IP connection between the organization and local public safety teams, which allows us to send additional data such as the floor plans and all the additional technology Jody was talking about. So before we jump into a demo, again, thanking Christian Brother College High School here. They do have the full suite of the 911 Inform solution deployed, from the compliance aspect to the cellular, as well as the connected building, which we'll go into here in just a second. So I'll have our resident Vanna White, Ivo, pull up the demo here and dial 911 from his cell phone so we can show you how this solution works and what it looks like. And in the meantime, what you're looking at on the screen right now is what's running in the background at West Central Dispatch, which is the local 911 center, otherwise known as the ECC or the PSAP. So as soon as an emergency is detected, whether it's a cellular 911 call or a 911 call coming from that PBX environment, we're going to see a notification pop up here. So if you guys want to look at Ivo, he's going to dial here. So if you can hear, that notification popped up roughly 5 to 10 seconds before he was connected with the individual at the 911 center. What that allows us to do is significantly cut down on response time. Now, a number of you will also have just received a notification to your cell phones, also alerting you that an emergency has taken place. So what you're looking at on the screen right now is a digitized floor plan that our team takes, digitizes, and uploads into the software, and that's going to pull in the geo coordinates exactly pinpointing where that caller is located. In this case, we're all sitting in the dining hall of this facility right now. You can see that pinpoint marker in the dining hall itself. Now, those notifications that you all receive can be sent out via text, email, or a desktop screen pop, and those can be broken down on a per building, per campus, per organization, or a regional level, making sure that anyone within your organization is immediately notified of what that emergency is and where it's taking place. This, again, is also being cast out directly to the public safety teams, so they're able to get that additional data. In this case, if you just told someone before you even entered this building, hey, we're meeting in the dining hall, chances are it'd take you a little time to figure out exactly where that is. But there's no questions on where that room is inside of that facility. Now, the geofencing aspect, I want to take a second to talk about that. It's not just the physical footprint of your facility. In this case, we're in a campus environment, so Ivo, if you were to zoom out there and show the larger facility, you can see that this is multiple acres here. We have parking lots, we have green space, we even have some ballparks and fields on the back end there. All of that will be accounted for within that geofence. So if, let's say, someone were to be walking in from that parking lot one day, slip and fall on the ice, and dial 911, previously you may not know about that until 4, 5, 6 minutes later when police, ambulance, whoever shows up, and is administering aid to that individual. With this, the notification is received immediately, and you know that you can go out and help that individual. Now, also within this notification, Ivo, if you don't mind zooming back out and clicking acknowledge there. So typically in that case, the local 911 center is going to acknowledge that that call has taken place. What that also shows is that bi-directional communication dialogue. You think of a 911 call previously, it was a one-to-one relationship. The only 2 people that knew what was going on is the person that dialed it on one end and the person who was receiving that on the other end at the 911 center. With this, we open that up to a one-to-many relationship. So let's say I'm that caller and I'm saying, hey, I'm having chest pain, having trouble breathing. Ivo, the dispatcher in this case, could add in, hey, based on our training, we know this is a heart attack, and that's going to send that data out to all the other individuals. They also have the ability to program in a variety of emergency codes, which can trigger a back-end workflow with the different devices that we're tied into. I'll go into that here in just a second. But it allows everyone to communicate, make sure that that situation is known by everyone, and resolved as quickly as possible. Now, we can also do internal notifications. I want to take a second to talk about that. You take a mental health facility as an example. There may be instances where a nurse is helping a patient out and they want to escalate that just to an internal alert. They don't necessarily want to get public safety, police, whoever else involved, but they want their local security to be aware of it. So we can program those into the phone system too. So if you dial star 777 as an example, that could just alert the local teams, letting them know that they need additional assistance in that room. Now, if Iva were to click on, let's say, the theater, maybe that caller's telling that dispatcher, hey, I know I dialed from this specific room, but I saw something happening down the hallway. I ran to the nearest phone that was available. You have the ability to update that emergency room. And when he does so, you'll also see that quickest access route change. So that is dynamic. It's going to show what the quickest access route is into that building. Again, more so for those external responders that are unfamiliar. As Ivo had pointed out earlier in that example, showing up to door 13, door 13 in that case, really sped up that response as opposed to them running through the entire facility. Now, all of that is part of that second module, as well as that first module, right? We're picking up the cellular 911 calls and the PBX 911 calls in this case. But then we could take it one step further, and why we brand it as an emergency response management platform is tying into all the additional technology that exists in those facilities. So in this case, if you were to click on that camera in the back of the dining room where we're all sitting on, you're going to get a live feed into exactly what's going on in that specific room the second that call is made. This is solution agnostic. It doesn't matter what type of video surveillance they have, door access control, and a number of other technologies that I'll talk about here in just a second. Ties into what's in place today. So also within that, we do have the ability to tie into door access or access control systems. So when Ivo pulled up those emergency notifications earlier, one of the workflows that I like talking through, let's say this was a lockdown situation. The second he clicked lockdown on that, what that could do is automatically play a message over that PA system. It can lock all exterior doors. But then, of course, if those doors are locked, first responders, public safety still need access into that facility. So if you were to click on one of those doors, you can remotely access that and then lock it up directly behind that individual as well. Now, one thing that I wanted to show, I would miss it if you did, but if you click back on that theater, let's say you want to get a better understanding of what that room looked like before you went into that, just from a public safety response perspective, they can get that 360 image so they can figure out, all right, well, if this is an active threat situation, where could someone be hiding or barricaded inside of those rooms? So this gives them that feed into it, a static image, just so they can get a better lay of the land before they even breach that entrance door. Now, one instance I want to point back to as well, and Ivo, if you go into battleship mode here, what this allows them to do, more so from a SWAT and public safety perspective, is mark a variety of different things on the map. So if public safety was going through clearing out that entire facility, they come across something that's by that front door where it was having them route through, they would be able to mark that as a bomb as an example. Now, the situation I like pointing back to is Columbine. Fortunately, unfortunately, those students placed bombs at all the entrance and exit points into that facility. Fortunately, none of them went off, but it was 18 minutes before that information was disseminated to all the different public safety teams. With this, putting that data onto that map is going to immediately alert everyone. It's going to reroute that individual and show them, hey, you should not be entering through this specific door. And all of this technology, as Jody had mentioned earlier, is only available during that emergency. So it's not a 24/7 feed into your facilities. They can't just randomly click and view video cameras. The second this emergency gets closed out, gets resolved, it removes all that access. So it gives them all that technology in their hands when they need it, but you don't need to worry about them watching you 24/7. And from a public safety perspective, if you pull up that video that shows the notification going into the MDT in the patrol vehicle, perfect. And while we're doing that, I do want to make an introduction to Adam Ubany. He is a former police officer and detective in the prosecutor's office. And just want to invite him up to say a couple words on how this platform could have helped in a number of situations where he was actively deployed into.
Thank you, Cody. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Ivo asked me to talk about my experiences. I'm going to date myself. 42 years of public service, so 25 years as a police officer, starting right as a police dispatcher. Growing up as a young kid, my father was a police officer, so every day I would see him get up, get dressed, put the old holster on that had a .38 special 6-shot with all the bullets lined up on the side, and shortly thereafter, as we were growing up, my brother became a police officer. So the logical thing everybody thought was, hey, Adam's going to be a police officer. No, I didn't want to do that. So I went out and started a landscaping company and a limousine business, and before you knew it, I'm getting sucked into the law enforcement world. So I became a police dispatcher, and it really opened my eyes. You talk about things, and let me digress for a minute. We talk about cell phones and 911 calls, and 911 was created about 40 years ago, 45 years ago. The cell phones were just discovered in the late 70s and really started to evolve in the 80s. I remember carrying the shoebox, right? Putting that thing up to your ear, or the ones that went in the cars. So I began in 1980. I was a police dispatcher for 3 years and then ultimately became a police officer and rose through the ranks. I retired in the prosecutor's office, as Cody said. And if we had this technology back then, oh my God. I have a story in Marlboro. A mom called and said, hey, listen, my daughter went to the park. She has not come home. And we sent the troops out, and everybody's looking, and nothing. And all of a sudden, one of the officers saw her on the side of the road. She had broken her ankle. She couldn't walk. She couldn't get home. The best feeling that I ever had as a police dispatcher, even though my law enforcement career, was being able to tell the mom on the phone that she was safe. Although injured, she was safe. When you look at this technology, I remember the days of doing a search warrant, going through the door, whether it was announced or no announcement. And prior to that, you're taking the mirror and putting it under the door to see who's on the other side. The 360 view of the room that Cody talked about. Think about that. In here, barricaded subject, crisis, any type of situation, to be able to have that view of the room to show in a classroom, closets, bathrooms, maybe curtains or desks the way they're situated. That is very important for a first responder. In addition to that, the EMS calls that Cody talked about. We used to have to go to the front door. The custodian or the principal or the nurse would come out and say, okay, follow me, and you go through the maze of the school, and then you get to the person that needs your attention. Now, this directs you right to the closest door during the emergency. So now you have your ECC, your Emergency Communication Center, or your PSAT. They're answering the call, 911, what's the location of your emergency, or where are you, or what's the problem? And by the time they're answering that call, your administration folks here are already getting the notification. They're already going, they're already charging to that call to help people. The other thing that I think is very important, besides the cameras, the maps also lay out AEDs, they lay out fire alarms. You can put your water valve controls or your electronic controls all on this to help first responders. I call them maps here. I sort of joke about it, but maps on steroids, because that's what it is. The maps are just, take a static map and then use this map. The law enforcement response time is cut with this. With this type of mapping, this overlay. This is very important to the whole piece to bring it all together for law enforcement. And the other nice thing about this is once the PSAP or ECC gets this call, they can invite other group users to monitor and observe and look at these maps to see what's going on. So now you have an incident command situation where you're going to establish incident command, you're going to have a commander, you might have a unified command, which is police, fire, EMS, emergency management. Everybody now is on the same page. Everybody is looking at the same map. Everybody knows where the emergency is. And again, with the cameras, with the live views, with the 360 images, that all plays a major part. So in an emergency, if incident command has to be established, you can send, the ECC can send the emergency to the first responder, to the police officer in charge, OIC. They can then look at this map, put their plans together, and then respond accordingly. So we have a video that shows you the pass-through, if you will, to those on the street. So this will allow that pass-through, the officer responding or the officer that gets there will have this now on his mobile data terminal. They can open up the maps, interact, comments, acknowledge, they can lock the school down, they can maneuver through to direct others to the site, to the scene of the incident. So again, this is powerful. This is powerful compared to the 1980s when I first got on the job. You know, even when I retired in 2005, this technology was not there. And think about what you see on TV, just in the news itself, with all the unfortunate incidents going on. This is maps on steroids. This is a game changer. This is a game changer in the way of public safety and the facilities like this here. So, with that, Jody?
Thank you, Adam. So, we're going to open it up to questions, but, I live in Colorado, so it's very close to, our hearts right now, is the shooting we just had at the King Soopers in Boulder, right? And so to tie back in to how this works, right? So in the shooting in Boulder, there were multiple people that saw the individual get the gun out of the trunk of his car and call 911 from the parking lot. Either the dispatch person at the ECC could have pushed one button and locked down that store before they got in, or anybody in the store that we notified could have locked down the grocery store before they ever got in. Then the police wouldn't enter the building because they didn't know where the shooter was. And we hear from police all the time, when we get to the building, we're blind. We don't know what's going on. By giving them access to all that technology, they would know exactly where that shooter was in that building and how to attack. When just the hostage situation at the Jewish synagogue, right? They were finding the person that built the building to find the floor plans to see what was going on inside, right? Again, with our technology, they would have access to all the cameras inside that building. It just changes the game on how public safety can respond. So anyway, very excited about the product. Thank you for joining. I wanted to do a shout out for Avaya, who worked hard on this as well, so thank you. But I want to open it up for questions either online or in the audience and see if you have any questions. No, we reuse what the customer has. So they don't have to buy new equipment. Now there are applications like on video cameras. Oh, sure. So the question was like on the access control, the door lock systems and camera, do you have to put in new? And the answer is no, we can tie into the customer's existing technology. There are applications like on video cameras like weapons detection, right? At the shooting in Boulder, when they went back and looked at the footage, the cameras actually picked up the person getting the weapons out of the car. But nobody's watching the video camera. So we have partners. That have that technology that watches when you don't watch, right? It would alert you when that camera saw somebody getting a weapon out of the car. So there are times where it makes sense to add some additional, but I would say most of the time we reuse 100% of what the customer has.
Let's say it's a brake system, they have locks on their door, brakes monitors that. Is that a contractual relationship between brakes and 911?
It's really between the customer and Brinks, but we bring the vendor in. So we work with the vendor. That's part of what the due diligence we do is who is your access control? Who's the contact person? So we work with them to do that integration. And a lot of the integrations are API based, and so it's very, very easy. But some of them are really old, right? And we're push the plunger to leave. We can even tie into those with a little robot that we made that does switch hook that we can control those doors even remotely on the older doors. I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah, so we really, so the question is if in a campus environment, and we see a lot of large customers through acquisition end up with different types of PBXs at different locations. And yes, for the most part, we're able to connect to almost any PBX out there, hosted or on premise, and monitor the movement of those sets and tie into those, and tie into the technology, in those different buildings.
For commercial clients or sports venues or campus environments, they want to know what's going on, not only on their campuses, but what's in the immediate area. So if there's an emergency, they can at least be prepared for it, they can notify others. How large of a geofence area can you make for that?
There are some rules around the geofence areas. In some places you can go like out to the middle of the road. A lot of times they don't want you to geofence outside your property line. But a lot of times, especially for the large sporting events, they allow that to be a little wider because usually people that are coming there are coming to that event anyway, and they're just maybe a half a block away. So you can set that out a little wider on those. But it actually goes through an approval process on your geofence from Rapid SOS. Yeah, so there's 5,400 centers across the country, and so when you think about ray bombs and directing that traffic, we use bandwidth as our back end and what bandwidth is one of four companies that route to all the PSAPs. So when one of our customers has a 911 call, they send it to bandwidth. Bandwidth comes to us and says, give me the location information. And we do that on the fly at the time of the call. We update that location so that it gets to the correct PSAP because you figure somebody who works in the office, now they take their IP phone home, there's a very good chance they're going to a completely different PSAP. And so we got to make sure we track that, and when it's sent out, we send it to the right location. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, so for us, because we're embedded in Rapid SOS. Rapid SOS is really the leader of the next gen 911 into PSAPs. They're in PSAPs today that cover 93% of the population. Therefore, we are too, right? So it makes it that's an easy lift for us. And if you've been to a PSAP, a call taker has like 7 screens. The last thing they want to do is add a new piece of software. And so again, with our solution being embedded in there, it's a real advantage for us. The emergency service. No, and again, we follow the same procedure as Rapid SOS. We provide all of our information for free to the PSAPs. So the end users, the corporate campus or the hospital or the higher ed, that's who buys our system, and then we deliver all that information to the PSAPs at no cost. Absolutely. They can, when they dispatch, you can have them, and those are what we sit down, and Adam's kind of the lead on that. Okay, the question is when, now I'm gonna draw a blank.
Effectively, that the police have, because they have access to the technology,
Oh.
whoever it is they're contacting, they're the ones that are sending the link out.
Right. So when the dispatch the question was, when the dispatch gets the information, they have do they have the ability to get it out to public safety that's being dispatched? And the answer is yes. And we work with the local police, and Adam kind of leads that charge on how do you want to notify, who do you want to notify. We have some that goes, if it's an active shooter, we want you to notify everybody. We have others that go, no, just notify the ones that are on duty. So it really is whatever their local procedure is, we'll follow that. Any other questions? Any IP camera we can tie into. And so we actually have an algorithm that we developed. And we have our video latency down to less than 1 second. So it's real-time video, and we tie directly to the camera. Instead, we've tried tying to the controllers, and the latency's just got to be too much. So we tie directly to the camera, and we can tie into any IP camera. So the question was, behind me there's a door, and the question is, who would have access to that? The customer determines that, right? So we say, and it can be different on the type of alarm, right? So if it's a medical emergency, I'm going to notify a different group of people, and I'm going to give a different group of people control. If it's a lockdown, I'm going to notify a different group of people, and I'm going to decide who I give control then. So as a customer, and on the public safety side, they determine who has that access. But we track every keystroke in the system. And that was one of the big things we got from public safety and from police, that after the event's over, and Adam, I'm sure you can attest to this, after the event's over, it's so hard to put back together who did what and when. We track everything in the system down to, so if you had 20 people responding, we would know this person opened this door at this time, they viewed this camera, they viewed this 360 room, they cleared this room. Every keystroke in the system is tracked by every individual, and this has been a huge thing for that public safety is like, just because they put it back together. So there's a small example of a report, just a standard timeline of who did what.
And what's really important is, let's face it, right, for school administrators, most of the time you're getting a call saying, hey, why did it take you 15 minutes to get to my kid who broke his ankle maybe out on the field? Or he was having an allergic reaction. Why did it take you so long? Here it is, in black and white. You can't make it up after the fact. You can't go back and put it in. It's here. And unfortunately, in today's society, we see it all too often in lawsuits. Again, shootings, people getting injured. You can't make this up. So if one of the first acknowledgments for a school administrator could be, hey, somebody called 911, I'm investigating. I'm going that way. It shows up. I'm here, it was done in error, it was an accident. It shows up. Or, hey, I need an ambulance. I need the AED. I need help. It shows up. So that's important to have that history, that log that is created, that you can't go back, it can't be maneuvered, but it's in the system.
Yeah, the reporting has been really, it's been super popular with, the events, because you can go back. And what's nice is you can run our software in drill mode, and almost everybody now has to do drills. It really helps you get better, right? Because now I do a drill, and now I can go back and look at how did everybody do, right? I'll give you a perfect example. We worked with the school, and they go, we got everything down. We know exactly. We want you to put it electronically, but we already have all the procedures down. They do the first drill. They didn't understand traffic to get the kids to the reunification points, and it picked it right up, right? And they changed where they were sending those kids based off of running drills on the system, because they could see that at that time of the day it took them forever to get the kids across the street because of traffic. And so the running in drill mode really helps you, fine tune your operation. And any corporation or any type of business can run in drill mode.
It may not apply here in this particular environment, but in more compact cities where there's a situation that requires someone who has not done one informed solution. So let's say something, an event happens a mile down the road, and the PSAP is getting that information, and they go in and alert, for example, CDC that there's an event a mile away, you should consider locking down, right? You should consider sheltering in place. How does that work?
So we actually have partners that do that kind of that reverse, and Avaya is a good example of that, right? They have a package a notification package that you could say, I want to notify everybody within a mile of here that, this event's going on. We have it within schools because sometimes you have schools by each other. So we can, with our system, we can automatically notify any other school that one of our customers, in the school district, that there's something happening here or shelter in place. So there's a couple different ways to do that. But outside of the geofence, we usually rely on a partner to provide that outgoing calling.
Is there a way to also, if you have, say something's happening in the dining hall there, you lock down those doors, is there a way to access the intercom system so it doesn't go there, it tells all those children to go out that door?
Absolutely, and if the paging does zone paging, we can do all the zone paging. So the question was, if you had, an event on one side of the building, can you access just certain things on that side of the building? You absolutely can. And that is, again, if you can see inside that building, you can make those type of determinations. That's what happened at Boulder at the shooting was, they couldn't see inside the building, so they didn't know where to enter the building or where to tell the people inside to go because they didn't know where they are. The same way with what happened down in the hostage situation a couple weeks ago. They couldn't determine what to do because they couldn't see inside the building. With our system, they absolutely would have seen that. You repeat the question, would you? Okay, open space, great. So the question is, what about open space? I'll give you a couple good examples. So one, we can geofence open spaces. We've even looked at Yellowstone National Park, right, as a request. But a perfect example of that is ski areas, right? So you think of a ski area, visitors coming, they're skiing, they fall, they break their leg, they call 911, they go, where are you? They go, I don't know, right? And you got all patrol out looking for them. We can pop a map of that ski area and show exactly where it is. We can list where all the assets are, where the snowmobiles are, where the sleds are. I mean, it's just a complete game changer. So we see open spaces as a really, really, a good example of what our product can take care of.
One other thing too on that question is we're looking right now, New Jersey has 131 miles of beach. Oh. I might just stay up here with you.
There you go.
In New Jersey, we are about open space. We're looking at 131 miles of beach in New Jersey. And right now, we're looking to do a proof of concept on the Belmar Beach. Think about it. You're at the beach, you're there all day, you might have a couple of drinks, you might stay out in the sun, fall asleep. 911 is dialed on a beach. Where are you? I have no clue. I'm on the Belmar Beach. We are going to geofence and micro-geofence those areas, so when a 911 call is made, just like that dining hall, that pin's going to drop there. It's going to give that area of where that person is.
And in that case, we would notify like all the lifeguards that are on duty, right? So you can note. So we would notify all the lifeguards that are on duty in that, where today they're completely blind to that call.
Timeline there, this chat, all that, is that married in any way to the recording of the call? Something would be able to play back the recording and see the events through the timeline at the same time, or because the 911 words are reflected.
So the questions around the recording of 911 calls. I'll tell you, there's two thoughts on the recording. If the customer, one, we don't do the recording because it's recorded at the 911 center and the customer can do the recording. But there are best practices, right? You really got to care for HIPAA laws when you're recording, because if that person's on talking to the call taker, giving medical history, and other people are listening and share that medical history, right? It's an issue, right? So we usually recommend don't record 911 calls, although some customers want to do that and do it. But our recommend typically the best practice is, with HIPAA, not to do that.
Which makes sense, but your solution is no marrying of those two
No.
sides.
No, and we don't store those recordings because they're already recorded probably two places. Why store another recording of it?
When they go in the ER, bigger space, and something's going on somewhere else in the hospital, how are they gonna know that? They're out of their car, run into the ER, customers
Well, I'll let Adam, but I'll tell you my experience is they tend to know, dispatch knows where their police are, right? And so if they're there, they're going to notify them. The minute they dispatch them, they're going to get that information. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. They will get that information. When we do training for school teachers, well, I'm not going to put this on my phone. I don't want to be notified on my phone. It's my phone. I bet you check your email during the day and your text messages during the day, and you're a teacher and you don't want to help protect the kids. Same thing with police officers. They're going to have their cell phone. So they can be invited into, the guys on duty, the guys and gals on duty will be invited into that event. So if they're going to the ER, there's an issue there, they were notified by the PSAP, by the ECC, they can pop that map up on their phone and now walk through the hospital where that emergency is. It will follow them on their phone.
And I would tell you one thing that police don't want to do is download an application to their phone because it makes their phones discoverable. So with ours, with the one-time link, the minute that event's over, that link's gone. So they're not downloading an application on their phone in order to be part of the conversation.
It's not operable, it's not there.
All right, I think we'll go with one more question and then we'll call it.
I noticed you showed a tough look installation inside of a police car. And some cops are now carrying devices on their bodies or handhelds. It's not a phone, but it's a handheld. Does that go along with it?
Absolutely. That same, we can still deliver to that device just like this device. We're also seeing some of those devices have live camera feeds, and we're looking at doing the integration with those where you can actually, a commander could actually see what the policeman sees as they're going through an event because they can view that camera live through our application. So that's something we're evaluating right now. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody that was online. And, any questions we can handle or any questions that you have, we'd love to help you with, or anybody, that needs any additional information, we're happy to provide it. Thank you very much.